Imagine, for a moment, the ancient world at the crossroads of faith, rumor, and legend. In the shadows of history, there are stories that flicker like distant candle flames, barely illuminating the vast unknown, yet persistent enough to draw us closer. Among these is the tantalizing mystery surrounding Joseph of Arimathea, a figure who appears briefly but pivotally in the canonical Gospels. He enters the biblical narrative at a moment of profound grief and uncertainty, securing the body of Jesus after the crucifixion and placing it in his own tomb. This act, often depicted as one of compassion and courage, is well known. But what if the story did not end there? What if, hidden beneath centuries of tradition and dogma, there lies a lost gospel, one that claims to record Joseph's secret journey after Jesus, offering a radically different perspective on the aftermath of the crucifixion? The concept of lost gospels or forgotten texts is not new. Throughout the centuries, discoveries of ancient manuscripts, often found in deserts, monasteries, or the accidental crevices of time, have upended what we think we know about the early Christian world. Yet, few figures are as enigmatic as Joseph of Arimathea. He is sometimes revered, sometimes overlooked, and always surrounded by questions. Why did he, a member of the council that condemned Jesus, risk his reputation to care for the Nazarene's body? What became of him after the burial? And why do alternative traditions and apocryphal tales cluster so thickly around his name, suggesting that his role in the Christian story extends far beyond what the New Testament reveals? Somewhere between the lines of accepted scripture and the margins of heresy, the legend of a lost gospel attributed to Joseph of Arimathea emerges. It is said to contain suppressed knowledge, secret journeys, and revelations that challenge the boundaries between history and myth. For centuries, whispers of such a text have tantalized historians, theologians, and seekers alike. But why does this particular lost gospel inspire such fascination? Is it mere curiosity about what might have been, or does it touch on something deeper, a yearning to fill the silences and gaps left by official narratives? In an age when information is at our fingertips, the idea that vital pieces of our shared past could remain buried or deliberately hidden feels both thrilling and unsettling. This script invites you on a journey through those silences and shadows. We will not simply retell old legends or summarize what little is known about Joseph of Arimathea. Instead, we will explore the origins of the lost gospel tradition, trace its echo through historical records, and examine the broader implications of what it means to seek forbidden or forgotten truths. Along the way, we will confront fundamental questions about faith, evidence, and the power of narrative, how stories, whether true or imagined, shape our understanding of the past and, in turn, our vision of the world today. Why does the notion of a secret gospel after Jesus matter now, centuries after the fact? Perhaps it is because each generation confronts its own uncertainties and hungers for meaning. Perhaps it is the allure of secret knowledge, or the hope that somewhere in the dust of history, there remains a key to unlock mysteries we barely dare to name. As we embark on this exploration, prepare to challenge assumptions, reconsider familiar tales, and encounter the profound intersection of history, legend, and the human search for answers. The journey ahead promises not only to illuminate the story of Joseph of Arimathea but also to reveal why lost gospels, real or imagined, continue to captivate the curious mind. As we trace the roots of the Joseph of Arimathea narrative, an intricate tapestry of historical context, cultural interplay, and religious evolution emerges. The first-century Mediterranean world was an arena where ideas, traditions, and beliefs collided, merged, and sometimes clashed. Within this dynamic environment, the figure of Joseph, otherwise a minor character in the earliest Christian texts, begins to acquire deeper layers of meaning through the shifting sands of oral tradition and the gradual codification of Scripture. The historical Joseph likely belonged to a class of influential Judeans, possibly aligned with the Sanhedrin. Yet, the circumstances of his actions, and their aftermath, are colored by the political realities of Roman-occupied Judea. In this era, burial customs carried profound significance, bound up with notions of honor, purity, and communal memory. The act of securing a tomb, especially for someone condemned by the authorities, was not only a personal risk but also a statement that echoed through the tightly knit society of Jerusalem. Set against this backdrop, the earliest Christian communities faced both external scrutiny and internal questions about identity, legitimacy, and continuity. For these followers, stories about key figures, especially those who showed unexpected courage or loyalty, became touchstones for communal reflection. The brief canonical accounts of Joseph may well have served as seeds for a growing oral tradition, one that sought to fill narrative gaps and provide spiritual encouragement in a time of uncertainty. Over successive generations, as Christianity spread beyond its Judean roots into the wider Greco-Roman world, the appetite for deeper backstories and hidden wisdom only intensified. It is within this fertile ground that the idea of additional, possibly secret, writings began to flourish. Moving forward, it is essential to recognize the role of apocryphal literature in shaping the broader context of early Christian storytelling. This body of texts, existing alongside the emerging canon, often explored alternative perspectives, gave voice to marginalized figures, and speculated about events left unaddressed by official accounts. Far from being static or monolithic, early Christian communities were marked by diversity of thought, practice, and interpretation. The proliferation of writings attributed to apostles, disciples, and ancillary figures like Joseph reflects a vibrant culture of theological exploration, where boundaries between historical recollection and creative elaboration were often porous. Stories circulated orally for decades before being committed to parchment, and as they traveled, they absorbed local color and responded to new audiences' hopes and fears. Another pivotal factor influencing the rise of the lost gospel tradition is the interplay between Christian and pre-existing local legends. In the British Isles, for instance, tales began to surface centuries later, asserting that Joseph of Arimathea journeyed westward, bringing with him sacred relics or even the Holy Grail. These narratives, blending Christian motifs with older Celtic belief systems, provided a sense of spiritual continuity for communities weathering waves of change, be it invasion, conversion, or social upheaval. The motif of a wise outsider bringing transformative knowledge resonates powerfully across cultures, echoing mythic archetypes from Prometheus to Quetzalcoatl. In this context, the lost gospel attributed to Joseph functions not merely as a forgotten text but as a vessel for collective longing, a bridge between ancient wisdom and emerging identities. Delving deeper, the historical moment of canon formation, when church authorities began to define which texts belonged in the New Testament and which did not, created fertile ground for speculation about what might have been omitted or suppressed. Debates over orthodoxy and heresy were not abstract theological exercises, they reflected real struggles for authority, legitimacy, and cohesion within a rapidly expanding religious movement. When certain writings were excluded, whether for doctrinal, political, or practical reasons, they did not simply vanish. Instead, they often gained an aura of forbidden knowledge, fueling subsequent quests for lost gospels and secret teachings. In this light, the legend of Joseph of Arimathea's secret account is inseparable from the broader dynamics of inclusion, exclusion, and memory that shaped early Christian history. Contemporary discoveries of ancient manuscripts, think of the 20th century finds at Nag Hammadi or the Dead Sea Scrolls, underscore just how much remains unknown about the earliest centuries of Christianity. Each new fragment or codex offers a glimpse into the diversity and complexity of beliefs that once flourished in parallel with the traditions that became mainstream. The persistent allure of a lost gospel attributed to Joseph is grounded in this reality, the sense that behind the official story, there are countless other voices waiting to be heard. For modern seekers and scholars alike, the context in which such a text might have arisen is as significant as the content itself, illuminating not only the history of a single figure but also the rich, contested landscape from which the Christian story emerged. Stepping into the intricate web of ideas surrounding the so-called lost gospel of Joseph of Arimathea, a fresh set of concepts and discoveries reveals itself, distinct from the roots and context already traced. At the heart of this exploration is the very nature of what a gospel means outside the canonical boundaries. Unlike the established four, alternative gospels often took the form of secret teachings, personal testimonies, or visionary accounts. In the case of Joseph, the suggestion is not merely that he continued the story after Jesus, but that he bore witness to episodes and revelations hidden from public view. This possibility introduces a different layer, the idea of spiritual transmission, where unique insights are entrusted to a select few, passed down like treasured heirlooms rather than broadcast to the masses. Such a motif is not unique to Christianity. Many traditions feature the motif of a hidden disciple, the keeper of truths too potent or controversial for general circulation. Adding another dimension, the content attributed to the lost Gospel of Joseph, as reconstructed from scattered references and later retellings, often diverges sharply from familiar biblical themes. Instead of focusing solely on the aftermath of the crucifixion, some accounts suggest Joseph encountered mysterious figures, traveled to distant lands, or possessed objects imbued with miraculous power. One vivid thread describes Joseph as a guardian of a sacred vessel, not unlike the legends surrounding the Holy Grail, but recast in a variety of settings, sometimes in desert caves, other times in bustling foreign markets. These narratives, rich with symbolic resonance, function almost like parables. They are less concerned with historical accuracy and more invested in conveying lessons about endurance, faithfulness, and the search for meaning in the face of loss. Intriguingly, certain medieval manuscripts attributed to monastic chroniclers introduce a wholly different facet, the notion of Joseph as an early missionary, whose secret writings encode teachings designed to reconcile different religious traditions. Instead of a straightforward continuation of gospel events, these texts sometimes read like philosophical treatises or letters to distant communities. For instance, one fragment recounts a dialogue between Joseph and a prominent pagan philosopher, debating the nature of suffering and redemption. Here, the lost gospel becomes a vehicle for interfaith exchange, a bridge between competing worldviews. This approach not only enriches the legend but also mirrors the real-world complexities of how spiritual ideas migrate, adapt, and find new expression. What's more, the literary style of these lost gospel traditions often departs from the direct, narrative-driven prose of canonical scripture. Instead, they embrace allegory, riddles, and poetic imagery, perhaps a deliberate strategy to cloak controversial ideas in layers of metaphor. Imagine reading a passage where Joseph, confronted by a veiled stranger on a moonlit night, must choose between three paths, each symbolic of a different kind of faith. Such passages invite readers to ponder, interpret, and wrestle with ambiguity. This style encourages personal engagement, prompting each generation to discover fresh meaning rather than simply receiving fixed dogma. It's a reminder that spiritual storytelling can be as much about questions as answers. Moving from texts to practice, the influence of the Joseph tradition emerges in unexpected ways across centuries. In some remote communities, rituals and festivals have developed around the mythic journeys and supposed relics associated with him. Pilgrims travel to shrines, not solely to honor a historical figure, but to participate in a living story that blurs the boundary between fact and myth. In this sense, the lost gospel tradition functions almost like a living tapestry, continually rewoven by those who find inspiration in its mysteries. Now, picture yourself as a modern seeker arriving at one of these sites, not as a passive observer, but as an active participant in an evolving narrative. The power of these stories lies not in their provable historicity, but in their ability to provoke wonder and foster a sense of belonging among those drawn to their enigmatic promise. As we navigate the intricacies of these accounts, it becomes clear that the lost Gospel of Joseph of Arimathea, whether or not it ever existed as a single, physical manuscript, represents a dynamic interplay of myth, memory, and meaning-making. Its echoes surface wherever people hunger for stories that speak to loss, renewal, and the possibility of hidden truths awaiting discovery. The legacy of such a tradition is not measured by the certainty of its details, but by the vitality with which it continues to inspire, challenge, and unite. Shifting the focus from the realm of secret manuscripts and allegorical tales, let's now examine how the notion of a lost gospel attributed to Joseph of Arimathea ripples outward into the wider fabric of society, science, and modern culture. Where do such stories leave fingerprints on collective memory, and what does their persistent allure say about how we, as a civilization, grapple with uncertainty and the boundaries of the known? Consider, first, the way unverified narratives like this one can shape national and regional identities. In the British Isles, for example, legends surrounding Joseph's supposed arrival and his role in founding sacred sites have become woven into the cultural DNA of towns, landscapes, and even national mythologies. This isn't just about religious tradition, it's about the creation of communal stories that help people situate themselves within history. When a community claims descent from a figure as enigmatic as Joseph, that lineage becomes a story of resilience, legitimacy, and unique destiny. The lost gospel, then, acts as a kind of invisible thread, stitching together generations with a shared sense of purpose, even when the historical evidence is thin. Moving from cultural identity to scientific inquiry, the search for lost texts often intersects with the cutting edge of technology and scholarship. Modern archaeologists, linguists, and data scientists deploy everything from ground-penetrating radar in ancient ruins to digital imaging that reveals erased palimpsests on fragile parchment. The quest to uncover a forgotten gospel has inspired the development of advanced analytical tools, driving innovation in fields as diverse as materials science and artificial intelligence. Now, think about how this pursuit mirrors the broader human impulse to recover what time has concealed. Every breakthrough, whether it's a fragment of a scroll or a deciphered inscription, offers a tangible connection to the lives and hopes of those who came before us. Yet there's a paradox here: the harder we search for definitive evidence, the more we confront the limits of our knowledge, prompting us to reflect on the nature of faith, proof, and the ever-present gaps in our historical record. Building on these scientific advances, the impact of lost gospel legends extends into the realm of literature and popular media. Filmmakers, novelists, and artists have long been drawn to the enigma of Joseph and his supposed writings, exploiting the tension between what is known and what might be hidden. Blockbuster movies and best-selling books often use the motif of a missing gospel as a narrative engine, fueling quests that blur the line between detective work and spiritual pilgrimage. This creative engagement does more than entertain; it shapes public understanding, introducing new generations to the questions and controversies that swirl around ancient mysteries. The influence is reciprocal. As fictional portrayals gain traction, they can inspire new scholarly inquiries or even spark fresh rounds of speculation about what remains undiscovered. Simultaneously, the persistence of lost gospel tales reveals something fundamental about the human psyche. We are, by nature, drawn to the unfinished, the incomplete, the hint of a deeper reality just out of reach. This longing manifests in the way we approach scientific paradoxes, philosophical debates, and even personal relationships. When faced with gaps in our understanding, we fill them with stories, sometimes plausible, sometimes fantastical, but always reflective of our deepest hopes and anxieties. The legend of Joseph's secret account serves as a mirror, reflecting our collective yearning for closure, meaning, and the reassurance that mysteries are, ultimately, solvable if only we search hard enough. Taking a step further, the implications of such narratives can be traced in contemporary debates about authority, authenticity, and the democratization of knowledge. In an era marked by information overload and skepticism toward traditional gatekeepers, the idea that crucial truths might be deliberately withheld or lost resonates powerfully. People question not only religious dogma but also the credibility of institutions tasked with preserving and interpreting the past. The lost gospel becomes a symbol, sometimes of hope, sometimes of defiance, inviting individuals to embark on their own journeys of discovery rather than passively accepting received wisdom. Now, consider how this dynamic plays out in your own life. When you encounter a story with missing pieces, do you seek out alternative voices, challenge official narratives, or simply let the mystery be? The allure of forbidden or forgotten texts is not confined to the ancient world; it pulses through the heart of modern culture, shaping how we approach uncertainty and the search for truth. Finally, the broader relevance of these lost gospel traditions is apparent in the ongoing conversation between science, faith, and imagination. Rather than existing in separate silos, these domains often intermingle, each influencing how we interpret the past and envision the future. The enduring fascination with Joseph of Arimathea's supposed writings highlights the porous boundaries between evidence and interpretation, fact and legend. It reminds us that the stories we inherit, and those we imagine, are both shaped by and shapers of the world we inhabit. Each time a new layer of the narrative is uncovered or invented, it becomes part of a living dialogue about what it means to remember, to question, and to believe. Peeling back the layers of legend and lore around the lost gospel of Joseph of Arimathea, a host of challenges and controversies swiftly surfaces, each with its own set of implications for how we engage with history and belief. One of the most persistent hurdles is the sheer absence of direct, authenticated evidence. For every whisper of a hidden manuscript or shadowy account, there is a chorus of scholars questioning the reliability of sources, the motives behind their creation, and the ease with which wishful thinking can morph into apparent fact. Sifting through medieval chronicles, oral traditions, and later embellishments, researchers encounter a landscape riddled with forgeries, anachronisms, and deliberate inventions. The temptation to believe in the existence of a secret text, perhaps tucked away in a forgotten monastery or concealed by a clandestine society, is strong, but so too is the risk of projecting modern desires onto ancient silences. At the same time, the proliferation of myths connected to Joseph's post-crucifixion journey introduces a thornier issue: the role of collective imagination in shaping what is accepted as plausible or even possible. Myths evolve not only to inspire, but also to fill in the blanks left by ambiguous or incomplete records. However, the line between imaginative reconstruction and outright fabrication can blur quickly, especially when communities stake their identities on particular versions of the past. When legends crystallize into local tradition, they often resist critical scrutiny, becoming protected by a kind of cultural inertia. This dynamic complicates honest inquiry, as questioning a cherished story can feel like an attack on the very fabric of communal belonging. Now, picture yourself in a place where Joseph's legacy is celebrated with annual pageants or rituals. Challenging the authenticity of such stories might not only invite skepticism, but outright hostility. Further complicating the picture are the controversies that swirl around the gatekeepers of historical memory. Debates erupt over who holds the authority to authenticate, interpret, or even suppress ancient texts. Academic institutions, religious leaders, and amateur sleuths frequently clash over the standards of evidence and the boundaries of legitimate investigation. These disputes can spill over into the public sphere, fueling suspicion that certain truths are being deliberately kept from view, sometimes for reasons of doctrine, sometimes due to political calculation, and sometimes simply to avoid unsettling established narratives. Such controversies are not limited to the realm of ancient manuscripts. They echo in discussions about transparency, censorship, and the politics of memory across countless domains. Adding yet another layer, the very notion of a lost gospel stirs up philosophical debates about the nature of scripture and revelation. If new documents were to surface, purporting to offer first-hand testimony from Joseph or anyone else, how would they be evaluated? Which criteria would determine their authenticity, and who would get to decide? The contentious history of canon formation demonstrates that questions of inclusion and exclusion are rarely settled by objective measures alone. Instead, they often reflect prevailing ideologies, power dynamics, and the shifting winds of interpretation. The hypothetical recovery of a Josephine gospel would likely ignite fierce arguments about its meaning, value, and implications for long-standing beliefs. Imagine the ripple effect: theological positions could shift, denominations could fracture, and new movements could arise around fresh interpretations. Equally intriguing are the psychological dimensions that feed both myth-making and skepticism. Some individuals are drawn to the allure of secret knowledge, convinced that what is hidden must be more profound or transformative than what is readily available. Conversely, others adopt a posture of rigorous doubt, wary of being misled by elaborate hoaxes or wishful thinking. This tension between credulity and cynicism is not unique to religious or historical mysteries. It plays out wherever uncertainty reigns and the stakes are high. Now, reflect on your own response when faced with an extraordinary claim. Do you feel the pull of the marvelous, or the urge to demand proof? The lost gospel of Joseph of Arimathea operates as a kind of psychological mirror, reflecting the broader human struggle to balance openness to wonder with the discipline of critical thought. In the midst of these complexities, one cannot ignore the practical challenges facing those who pursue the truth behind ancient texts. The fragility of physical evidence, the gaps in the historical record, and the ever-present risk of misinterpretation all conspire to frustrate even the most determined researcher. Yet, it is precisely this combination of obstacles, intellectual, cultural, philosophical, and material, that makes the search both daunting and irresistible. The controversies surrounding Joseph's lost gospel do not merely impede progress, they propel it, ensuring that the journey toward understanding remains as dynamic and contested as the story itself. Delving into the heart of the Joseph of Arimathea legend, a particularly fascinating facet emerges when you consider the ways this narrative has been appropriated to serve diverse ideological agendas. Throughout different eras, groups with varying beliefs have strategically invoked Joseph's supposed writings or journeys to legitimize their causes. In the Middle Ages, for instance, certain monastic orders claimed secret links to his teachings, using these assertions to justify their unique rituals or to assert spiritual primacy over rivals. This leveraging of myth for institutional advantage demonstrates how a legend can morph into a tool for authority, subtly influencing the structure and priorities of entire communities. Such appropriations often ignited rivalries and power struggles, as competing factions vied to anchor their identities in the perceived authenticity of Joseph's legacy. The competition was not merely spiritual but also political, shaping the organizational landscape of early and medieval Christianity in subtle but enduring ways. Turning from organized groups to individual seekers, it's striking how the pursuit of hidden knowledge tied to Joseph has fueled personal quests for meaning far beyond the boundaries of formal religion. In the Renaissance, a period marked by a hunger for esoteric wisdom, thinkers from various backgrounds, alchemists, poets, explorers, became enamored with the idea that Joseph's lost gospel might contain encoded truths about the nature of transformation, immortality, or the cosmos itself. Some went so far as to construct elaborate symbolic systems, believing that the keys to life's greatest mysteries were concealed in parables or numerical patterns supposedly left by Joseph. The fervor with which these individuals chased shadows is a testament not only to the enduring allure of mystery but also to the human tendency to find patterns and significance in the unknown, especially when traditional sources of certainty fall short. Moreover, the mythic narrative surrounding Joseph has sparked a surprising array of artistic responses that extend well beyond the written word. Painters, sculptors, and musicians have interpreted the story in ways that emphasize its emotional and psychological dimensions. For example, some visual artists have depicted Joseph as a solitary wanderer, his face etched with both sorrow and resolve, embodying the archetype of the seeker who bears a burden of knowledge others cannot comprehend. Musicians have composed works that evoke themes of exile, spiritual longing, or the hope of revelation, using Joseph as a muse for exploring the tension between concealment and disclosure. These creative endeavors effectively transform the legend into a springboard for grappling with universal human experiences, alienation, perseverance, and the quest for understanding, ensuring that the story remains relevant no matter the era or audience. As the narrative has traveled across continents and centuries, it has also served as a lens through which societies have explored their relationship with the other, those perceived as outsiders or bearers of unorthodox truths. In some folkloric traditions, Joseph is recast as a cultural bridge, bringing teachings or artifacts to distant lands and engaging with local customs in ways that challenge assumptions about purity, belonging, or the boundaries of faith. This dynamic has encouraged reinterpretation and adaptation, prompting different cultures to infuse the legend with their own symbols, values, and anxieties. The result is a kaleidoscope of Josephine myths, each reflecting the distinct needs and aspirations of the community that embraces it. This process of adaptation underscores the fluidity of sacred stories and their capacity to both unite and divide, depending on how they are wielded. Now, consider how these shifting representations resonate in the digital age, where narratives can be instantly shared, reimagined, and debated across global networks. Online forums, speculative fiction, and immersive games have given fresh life to the Joseph legend, enabling new generations to engage with the mystery on their own terms. Participants are no longer passive consumers of tradition, they become co-authors, remixing ancient motifs to address contemporary dilemmas, questions about authenticity, exclusion, and the search for meaning in an information-saturated world. This digital reanimation of the legend demonstrates that the impulse to seek, question, and reinterpret is as vital as ever, driving the story of Joseph of Arimathea into uncharted territories of imagination and inquiry. Against the backdrop of enduring mysteries and shifting narratives, another essential dimension of the Joseph of Arimathea legend emerges when we turn our attention to the realms of personal transformation and the psychology of secrecy. People are often fascinated not merely by what is hidden, but by the process of seeking itself, a journey that transforms the seeker as much as the sought-after truth. In this context, the allure of the lost gospel can be seen as a metaphor for the inner quests individuals undertake to understand their own shadows, doubts, and aspirations. The notion of a secret teaching, one that must be discovered through perseverance and introspection, mirrors the way people wrestle with unanswered questions in their own lives. This parallel is especially resonant during times of upheaval or transition, when the boundaries between certainty and ambiguity feel particularly fragile. Encounters with the unknown, whether in ancient texts or personal crises, often catalyze growth, prompting individuals to reconsider long-held beliefs and to forge new paths forward. Delving deeper, the motif of secrecy within the Joseph tradition introduces a nuanced exploration of the tension between revelation and concealment. Many cultures throughout history have recognized that knowledge, to be truly transformative, often requires a period of gestation in silence or obscurity. Initiatory traditions, whether spiritual or philosophical, frequently weave in the idea that some truths are best approached gradually, through layers of symbolic language or ritual practice. The lost gospel, in this light, functions less as a literal document and more as an emblem of wisdom that unfolds at the pace one is ready to receive it. This approach stands in stark contrast to the modern demand for immediate access and transparency, challenging the assumption that all knowledge should be instantly available. Instead, it invites reflection on the value of patience, discernment, and the humility to accept that some mysteries may remain unresolved for good reason. In addition, the Joseph narrative has provided fertile ground for exploring the interplay between individual memory and collective forgetting. Psychological studies suggest that the stories we choose to remember, and those we allow to fade, shape not only our sense of self but also our relationships to communities and traditions. The legend of a hidden gospel speaks to the selective nature of memory, highlighting how certain details become enshrined while others are quietly omitted. This process is not always conscious, it can reflect unspoken anxieties, hopes, or social pressures that influence which aspects of a story are elevated or suppressed. For someone drawn to the Joseph myth, the act of searching for a lost text becomes a way of negotiating their own place within a broader historical and emotional landscape, a balancing act between honoring tradition and daring to question it. Furthermore, the idea of lost wisdom attributed to Joseph offers a compelling lens through which to examine the dynamic between authority and autonomy. In many narratives, the possessor of secret knowledge stands at the crossroads of obedience and innovation, tasked with deciding whether to preserve the status quo or challenge it with new insights. This dilemma resonates in contemporary debates about who gets to define truth and how dissenting voices are treated. The Joseph legend, recast as a drama of conscience, invites you to ponder the responsibilities that come with discovery. Is it better to safeguard a hard-won insight, sharing it only with those prepared to receive it, or to broadcast it widely in the hope of sparking change? Such questions echo throughout history, from whistleblowers in modern institutions to artists and thinkers who risk censure in pursuit of deeper understanding. All these facets coalesce in the lived experience of those who find themselves captivated by the possibility of hidden or forbidden knowledge. The journey to uncover Joseph's lost gospel often becomes a metaphor for the broader human drive to seek, learn, and transform. Whether the object of pursuit is a sacred text, a buried memory, or an elusive truth about oneself, the process is marked by uncertainty, perseverance, and a willingness to step beyond the familiar. As you reflect on your own encounters with the unknown, consider how the search itself can reshape your perspectives, fostering resilience and curiosity even in the absence of definitive answers. The legend's enduring appeal lies not only in what might be revealed, but in the transformative power of the quest itself, an odyssey that continues to unfold with each new generation of seekers. As the legend of Joseph of Arimathea's lost gospel continues to intrigue, it's essential to examine the ways this narrative has catalyzed entirely new forms of inquiry and creative speculation in modern thought. Rather than focusing solely on traditional religious or historical frameworks, some contemporary thinkers have leveraged the Joseph story as a springboard for exploring alternative epistemologies, systems for understanding how knowledge is created, shared, and validated. For instance, in certain circles of comparative mythology, scholars have drawn on the Joseph legend to analyze how societies construct hidden histories, using buried or secret texts as mechanisms to encode values and aspirations that might not be safe or permissible to express openly in their time. This approach positions the lost gospel not merely as an artifact to be found, but as a living symbol of the ways marginalized voices can persist beneath the surface of dominant narratives. Switching perspectives, the Joseph tradition has found resonance among advocates of speculative fiction and world-building, genres that thrive on the tension between the known and the unknown. Writers crafting elaborate fantasy worlds sometimes take inspiration from the tantalizing gaps in stories like Joseph's, using the motif of a lost or forbidden text to propel complex plots and ethical dilemmas. For example, a novelist might imagine a society shaped by the whispers of a vanished gospel, with characters divided by their interpretations of what was lost and what it might have meant. These scenarios allow creators and audiences alike to grapple with questions of authenticity, propaganda, and the ripple effects of incomplete records, all within the safe confines of fiction. Through this lens, the Joseph narrative becomes a tool for rehearsing the consequences of secrecy, suppression, and selective memory in a way that is both emotionally engaging and intellectually provocative. Additionally, the allure of Joseph's hidden account has inspired a range of experimental artistic practices that blur the boundaries between fact and fabrication. Some contemporary artists have staged immersive installations or participatory performances that invite viewers to search for pieces of a lost manuscript, blending real historical research with invented clues and artifacts. These experiences challenge participants to question their assumptions about evidence, trust, and the authority of the storyteller. Now, imagine yourself navigating such an installation, piecing together fragments that may or may not be genuine, all while being prompted to reflect on your own biases in the process. The blending of truth and fabrication in these settings forces audiences to confront the ambiguity inherent in all acts of discovery, underscoring the point that the journey toward meaning is often as significant as the destination itself. In a further twist, the Joseph tradition has also been invoked in contemporary discussions about information security and digital archives. Archivists and technologists have drawn parallels between hidden ancient manuscripts and the challenges of preserving, transmitting, and sometimes encrypting sensitive information in the digital age. The idea that critical knowledge might be intentionally obscured, whether on parchment or in encrypted files, has become a metaphor for debates about privacy, surveillance, and access to information. As society grapples with issues like data leaks or the ethics of releasing classified documents, the concept of a lost gospel offers a potent analogy for the tensions between transparency and protection in our increasingly networked world. Furthermore, some educational innovators have used the motif of the lost gospel as a pedagogical tool, constructing curricula that treat learning as a quest for hidden truths rather than a rote accumulation of facts. By framing lessons around the search for lost knowledge, educators encourage students to develop critical thinking, resilience, and a sense of wonder. Now, consider how this approach might reshape your own attitudes toward learning. Rather than viewing gaps in knowledge as failures, they become invitations to explore, question, and grow. The Joseph legend, when reframed in this manner, offers a powerful metaphor for lifelong learning, where every new mystery encountered is an opportunity to expand both understanding and imagination. Ultimately, these fresh applications and interpretations of the Joseph of Arimathea legend demonstrate that its significance extends well beyond theological debate or historical curiosity. It continues to evolve as a catalyst for innovation, inviting us to rethink how we engage with uncertainty, foster creativity, and navigate the ever-shifting boundaries between what is hidden and what is revealed. In grappling with the enduring intrigue of the lost gospel of Joseph of Arimathea, it's essential to turn our attention to the psychological and socio-cultural mechanisms that fuel the tenacity of such mysteries. Rather than seeing this legend as merely a remnant of ancient speculation, it's illuminating to observe how it functions as a living template for the negotiation of uncertainty and trust within communities. When a culture encounters gaps in its foundational narratives, those voids often become charged spaces, sites where collective imagination, suspicion, and hope intermingle. It's not uncommon for these voids to become battlegrounds, where competing interpretations vie for dominance, each offering reassurance or challenge to prevailing worldviews. Within this context, the the lost gospel operates less as an artifact to be conclusively discovered and more as a catalyst for ongoing cultural dialogue, a perpetual what-if that keeps traditions vibrant and adaptive. Pushing further, one encounters the intriguing phenomenon of inherited skepticism, a sort of generational memory that is less about the content of the lost gospel itself and more about the cautionary tales that spring up around it. Parents, teachers, and community elders often transmit not just stories, but also explicit warnings about the dangers of being led astray by seductive mysteries. In some settings, these warnings grow into elaborate cautionary rituals, such as symbolic reenactments or community debates staged to teach discernment in the face of ambiguous evidence. The effect is not purely restrictive, it also sharpens critical faculties, encouraging individuals to weigh evidence and to become comfortable with ambiguity. This active process of communal skepticism shapes the way people approach not only ancient legends but also contemporary uncertainties, from scientific controversies to political rumors. Now, picture how this plays out when a young person, newly curious about the legend, is coached in both the excitement of the chase and the discipline of doubt, a dynamic that is as much about shaping character as about resolving factual questions. Alongside these communal dynamics, the lost gospel legend provides fertile ground for the exploration of personal identity formation, especially in moments of crisis or transition. For individuals navigating the shifting terrain between old certainties and emerging beliefs, the possibility of a hidden or forbidden text becomes a metaphor for the uncharted territories within themselves. Psychologists have long noted that the allure of secret knowledge often intensifies during periods of upheaval, when people feel the urge to redefine who they are and what they stand for. In these moments, the lost gospel serves as a mirror, reflecting the tension between the comfort of inherited wisdom and the call to pioneer new understandings. Consider how, when faced with a major life change or a sudden loss, someone might find themselves drawn to the idea of undiscovered truths, using that pursuit as a vehicle for self-inquiry and reinvention, even if the search is ultimately symbolic. Shifting the lens to the interplay between secrecy and power, the Joseph narrative also invites critical reflection on how societies use the control of information to reinforce or challenge hierarchies. When knowledge is believed to be hidden or restricted, it introduces a dynamic of exclusion and privilege. Those deemed worthy of access gain status, while others may be left on the periphery. This stratification is not confined to religious or academic contexts, it echoes in corporate boardrooms, government agencies, and even social circles where insider knowledge is currency. The lost gospel, therefore, becomes a touchstone for conversations about who gets to define reality, who is trusted with secrets, and how transparency or opacity shapes the contours of authority. Imagine, for a moment, how the rumor of a secret text can destabilize established leaders, empower dissenters, or foster networks of quiet resistance within institutions. At the intersection of uncertainty, skepticism, personal growth, and social hierarchy, the lost gospel of Joseph of Arimathea stands as more than a tantalizing historical riddle. It operates as a living script through which individuals and communities rehearse their responses to the unknown, constantly renegotiating boundaries between what can be known, what must be questioned, and what is best left to the fertile landscape of collective imagination. Peering into the intricate web of historical interpretation, one finds that the lost gospel of Joseph of Arimathea has sparked a wide array of scholarly methodologies, each bringing its own lens to the search for hidden meaning. Textual criticism, for instance, has become an essential tool, not in pursuit of the gospel itself, but in analyzing the subtle shifts and interpolations that appear in related apocryphal writings and early church documents. By meticulously comparing variants, scholars can sometimes trace the fingerprints of ideas that may have originated from now-lost sources. This process often feels akin to reconstructing a shattered vase from scattered shards. Each fragment offers a clue, but the full picture remains elusive. For the diligent researcher, the hunt is less about definitive answers and more about unearthing the faint echoes of suppressed or forgotten narratives that ripple through the surviving literature. In a different vein, the intersection of anthropology and folklore offers a compelling window into how the legend has been woven into the fabric of everyday life. Rather than focusing on texts, anthropologists examine rituals, oral storytelling, and local customs that reference Joseph's enigmatic afterlife. In some coastal regions, for example, fishermen have invoked his name in blessing their nets, believing that the wisdom he carried, or perhaps the journeys attributed to him, conveyed protection over the waters. These practices are not about historical accuracy, but about the symbolic utility of myth in shaping community identity and resilience. By mapping the migration of these customs across generations and geographies, researchers reveal how the lost Gospel's influence extends far beyond the written word, embedding itself in the very gestures and habits of daily existence. Moving into the realm of comparative esotericism, another fascinating dimension unfolds. The Joseph narrative, through its association with hidden wisdom, has been appropriated by secret societies and spiritual movements seeking to draw a line of continuity between themselves and ancient, mystical traditions. These groups often construct elaborate initiatory rituals, claiming that the real teachings of Joseph survive only in symbolic form, decipherable by the initiated. Here, the lost gospel becomes less a concrete text and more a cipher, a puzzle whose solution promises personal transformation or enlightenment. The appeal lies in the process of decoding, in the tantalizing suggestion that the deepest truths are always just out of reach. For participants, the quest is not for historical veracity, but for a sense of belonging and an experience of revelation that transcends ordinary understanding. Shifting from the spiritual to the psychological, the motif of the lost gospel has also been interpreted through the lens of literary archetypes. Some theorists argue that Joseph functions as a classic, threshold guardian, in cultural storytelling, representing the figure who holds the keys to a new realm of knowledge but demands a test or sacrifice before passage is granted. This archetype appears in countless myths, legends, and even modern films, manifesting as the mentor who withholds guidance until the protagonist is deemed worthy. In this way, the lost gospel serves as a symbol of the barriers, real or imagined, that stand between the seeker and the wisdom they crave. When you encounter stories or life events that require perseverance, discernment, or courage before progress can be made, you are, in a sense, reenacting this archetypal encounter. Examining the influence of Joseph's legend on social innovation, it's noteworthy how the idea of a hidden or lost teaching has inspired creative problem-solving in unexpected fields. In some entrepreneurial circles, the notion of hidden value, assets or insights overlooked by mainstream thinking, echoes the allure of secret gospels. Innovators are drawn to the challenge of uncovering what others have missed, whether it's a disruptive technology, a market opportunity, or a new approach to an old problem. The metaphor of lost knowledge energizes teams to dig deeper, question assumptions, and persist in the face of ambiguity. Now, think about how this dynamic might play out in your own work or studies: the thrill of discovery, the satisfaction of piecing together an incomplete puzzle, and the transformative impact of insights that emerge only after sustained effort. Through these diverse scholarly, cultural, and psychological perspectives, the lost gospel of Joseph of Arimathea emerges not as a static enigma, but as a dynamic force continually reshaping itself to suit the needs and curiosities of each new era. This adaptability ensures that the legend is never merely a relic of the past, but an active participant in the ongoing evolution of human thought and creativity. If you shift your gaze to the impact of the Joseph of Arimathea legend on the formation of subcultures and underground movements, an entirely new facet emerges. Secret societies, fringe spiritual groups, and even certain artistic circles have, at times, adopted the Joseph mythos as a rallying point for their own rites and coded languages. Consider, for instance, how some clandestine brotherhoods in the 18th and 19th centuries wove Joseph into elaborate initiation ceremonies, using his alleged journey and hidden teachings as metaphors for personal rebirth or social transformation. These groups developed iconography and layered symbolism that mirrored what they imagined to be the veiled wisdom of Joseph's lost gospel. Through the use of cryptic emblems, chalices, veiled tombs, or labyrinthine engravings, they fostered a sense of exclusive identity, drawing boundaries between insiders and outsiders not just in terms of belief, but also in the rituals that defined membership. The legend in these contexts functioned less as an article of faith and more as a living framework for communal belonging, secrecy, and shared purpose. In a strikingly different direction, the Joseph narrative has inspired speculative inquiries into the psychology of exile and the human response to radical displacement. Rather than centering on hidden texts, some theorists have focused on the motif of voluntary departure, a prominent feature in stories where Joseph supposedly leaves Jerusalem for distant lands. This motif has been picked up by modern psychologists and sociologists probing the effects of self-imposed exile, whether physical, intellectual, or emotional. The Joseph archetype becomes a lens for exploring how individuals and groups navigate the uncertainties of starting anew, especially when cut off from their roots or traditions. Imagine, for a moment, a contemporary artist who, feeling alienated from mainstream culture, channels this sense of estrangement into creative work, drawing on Joseph's legendary journey as a symbol of both loss and possibility. The resonance of such a narrative can be profound, shaping the way people view their own migrations, literal or metaphorical, and the stories they construct to make sense of upheaval. Turning to the intersection of technology and myth, the Joseph story has quietly influenced the way digital communities structure their own systems of access and revelation. Discussion forums dedicated to esoteric knowledge or alternative history sometimes build intricate hierarchies reminiscent of legendary keepers of secret wisdom. Moderators are likened to guardians of hidden archives, while users construct tiered access based on trust and contribution. This digital echo of ancient secrecy does not simply replicate old patterns, it adapts them to the logic of networked society, where anonymity and pseudonymity create new forms of initiation and belonging. These spaces are not static, they thrive on the constant exchange of clues, puzzles, and speculative theories, mirroring the restless curiosity that underpins the Joseph legend itself. Now, think about your own participation in online communities, the ways you may be drawn to secretive subforums or exclusive group chats, and how that sense of being in the know shapes your engagement with others. Yet another dimension unfolds when considering how the legend influences the ethics of knowledge transmission. Teachers, mentors, and leaders in various fields have drawn inspiration from the idea of a hidden gospel not as something to be hoarded, but as a lesson in discernment about when and how to share insights. In some educational philosophies, the Joseph motif is invoked as a reminder that timing and readiness matter as much as content. The act of withholding information, when done judiciously, can foster deeper inquiry and personal growth. Picture a mentor who, rather than providing direct answers, poses carefully crafted questions that nudge a student toward their own discoveries. The Joseph archetype, in this context, becomes a model for teaching not by rote, but by awakening curiosity, a subtle but powerful shift from transmission to transformation. Lastly, the narrative has sparked investigations into the nature of legacy and the ways stories persist even when their original form is lost. Archivists and cultural historians have turned to the Joseph legend as a case study in the dynamics of oral transmission, focusing on how tales evolve to meet the changing needs of each generation. The process by which fragments, rumors, and reinterpretations accumulate over time reveals much about the social mechanisms that govern what gets remembered and what is allowed to fade. This approach does not seek to recover an authentic core, but rather to understand the fluidity of tradition and the creative adaptations that keep stories alive. As you reflect on the stories handed down in your own family or community, consider how they have shifted in retelling, and what that says about the desires and anxieties that shape collective memory. In this light, the legend of Joseph's lost gospel is less a fixed relic and more a living current, flowing through the ever-changing channels of human imagination and social practice. Expanding the lens beyond the familiar boundaries of legend and secrecy, the Joseph of Arimathea narrative invites a deep dive into the role of absence and obscurity as drivers of creative breakthrough. When stories leave gaps, whether deliberate or simply the result of lost records, those voids become fertile ground for innovation and reinterpretation. In contemporary art, for instance, some conceptual artists have used the motif of the missing gospel as a prompt to explore themes of erasure, memory, and the unseen. Imagine a sculptor who carves a figure into stone, then conceals it beneath layers of clay, inviting viewers to question not only what lies beneath but also why certain forms are hidden from view. This act of covering rather than revealing becomes a powerful metaphor for the way societies handle uncomfortable histories or ideas deemed too volatile for open discussion. Meanwhile, in the digital humanities, scholars have begun leveraging advanced machine learning algorithms to sift through vast archives of marginalia, palimpsests, and overlooked fragments. By training computers to recognize subtle patterns and cross-references, researchers hope to reconstruct potential connections to texts associated with Joseph that may have slipped through the cracks of traditional scholarship. The process is akin to assembling a puzzle with missing pieces. Each data point, however minor, can shift the broader picture and spark new hypotheses about the evolution of early Christian thought. This marriage of technology and historical curiosity introduces a layer of analysis previously impossible, reframing the search for the lost gospel as part of a larger quest to understand the dynamics of historical disappearance and rediscovery. In a different vein, the Joseph legend has also become a touchstone in the philosophy of narrative theory, particularly in discussions around the ethics of storytelling. Some theorists argue that the deliberate cultivation of ambiguity, leaving certain truths just out of reach, can compel audiences to grapple more deeply with moral and existential questions. If you think about your favorite novels or films, the most powerful ones often leave threads unresolved, inviting you to participate in meaning-making rather than passively receiving answers. Applied to the Joseph story, this suggests that the value of the lost gospel may rest not in its recovery, but in its capacity to provoke ongoing inquiry and dialogue. By resisting closure, the legend encourages a culture of questioning, fostering resilience in the face of uncertainty. Furthermore, the motif of an absent or hidden text has spurred explorations in the realm of cognitive psychology, especially around the concept of productive forgetting. Researchers have found that when certain details are inaccessible or ambiguous, people are often prompted to imagine missing information in ways that reflect their deepest values or anxieties. This process, far from being a flaw, can actually enhance creativity and adaptability, as it forces individuals to synthesize disparate clues and invent plausible narratives. Now, consider how this mechanism operates when you encounter an incomplete story. Does your mind rush to fill the gaps, and if so, what does that say about your personal worldview? The Joseph narrative, as an emblem of what is withheld, becomes a mirror for these inner processes, highlighting the interplay between omission and invention. Moving into the sphere of intercultural dialogue, communities with different religious or philosophical backgrounds have sometimes used the absence of definitive Josephine texts as a bridge for mutual exploration. Rather than arguing over fixed doctrines, participants engage in speculative conversation, using the idea of a lost gospel as common ground for sharing hopes, doubts, and dreams about the nature of truth and revelation. This open-ended approach has yielded surprising moments of empathy and connection, as individuals discover resonances between their divergent traditions. Instead of dividing, the uncertainty at the heart of the Joseph story can foster unity, an unexpected gift from a narrative defined by what it withholds. This ever-evolving interplay between loss and creation, ambiguity and interpretation, continues to shape the ways people engage with the legend and, by extension, with the broader mysteries of history and meaning. The enduring fascination with what remains hidden not only keeps the Joseph narrative alive but also fuels new forms of discovery, dialogue, and self-understanding. Turning our attention to the intricate relationship between the Joseph of Arimathea legend and the evolution of collective rituals, it becomes evident that stories of hidden or lost wisdom can act as powerful catalysts for the creation of new communal practices. Unlike rituals rooted directly in canonical texts, these emergent traditions often draw inspiration from the air of mystery and possibility that surrounds a narrative like Joseph's. For example, in certain localities, communities have devised ceremonies that revolve around the symbolic search for something concealed, whether it's an artifact, a message, or merely a metaphorical key to understanding. These events might take the form of nighttime processions, where participants carry lanterns and follow winding routes, mimicking the idea of a journey through darkness in pursuit of elusive light. The collective anticipation and shared uncertainty serve not only to bond participants but also to instill a sense of ongoing curiosity and hopefulness, a quality that becomes part of the community's living heritage. As the legend permeates different cultural landscapes, it often becomes intertwined with seasonal cycles or local markers of change. In some regions, festivals inspired by Joseph's supposed voyages coincide with moments of transition in nature, such as the spring equinox or the first harvest. The timing is no accident; these periods are already imbued with themes of renewal and the unknown. By layering the narrative of the lost gospel onto these natural rhythms, communities find a way to express their own uncertainties and aspirations about what lies ahead. The act of embedding a story within the predictable turning of seasons transforms abstract longing into tangible anticipation, providing a recurring opportunity for reflection and communal reinvention. Imagine, for instance, villagers gathering each year to bury a sealed scroll in the earth, only to unearth it months later, reading aloud its contents, be they poems, questions, or riddles, before composing new texts for the next cycle. Through this ritual, the myth of hidden knowledge becomes a living, evolving thread that weaves together generations. Shifting focus, the allure of concealed wisdom has given rise to dynamic performance art that blurs the boundaries between audience and participant. In urban centers, theater groups have staged immersive productions where the lines between character and spectator dissolve, and the audience is tasked with deciphering clues or piecing together fragmented narratives. These performances often draw on the motif of the lost gospel, challenging participants to adopt the mindset of seekers rather than passive observers. The process of active engagement, solving puzzles, following cryptic instructions, or collaborating with strangers, transforms the legend into a vehicle for experiential learning. The idea is not merely to entertain, but to cultivate adaptability, empathy, and the willingness to embrace ambiguity. By inviting individuals to step into the role of quester, these performances underscore the enduring power of myth to foster personal and collective transformation. Moving into the realm of contemporary education, the motif of the hidden or lost text has inspired innovative pedagogical strategies designed to ignite curiosity and critical thinking. Some educators, taking a cue from the Josephine tradition, structure their courses around the idea of a central mystery that students must unravel over time. Rather than presenting information in a linear, predetermined fashion, teachers provide scattered clues, contradictory accounts, and partial narratives. Students are encouraged to debate, hypothesize, and investigate, gradually piecing together their own understanding. This approach mirrors the uncertainties inherent in real-world knowledge, where answers are rarely straightforward and the search for truth demands both persistence and humility. In this context, the legend's emphasis on what is unknown becomes a metaphor for the intellectual journey itself, challenging learners to value the process of discovery as much as the destination. Taking these diverse applications together, it becomes clear that the Joseph of Arimathea legend functions as more than a source of idle speculation or historical curiosity. Its real potency lies in its capacity to spark new forms of collective expression, creative problem-solving, and lifelong learning. By continually inviting communities and individuals to engage with the unknown, the myth sustains a culture of active inquiry and flexible adaptation, qualities essential for navigating a world where certainty is often elusive and the horizon of knowledge ever recedes. Stepping into the lesser-known territories of the Joseph of Arimathea tradition, an unexpected dimension arises when we examine how the legend has been harnessed in the context of social justice and advocacy. Whereas many historic narratives are often leveraged to reinforce established power structures, the Joseph legend has occasionally been reinterpreted as a symbol for the marginalized, the outsider who acts with moral courage in the face of institutional indifference or hostility. This reinterpretation has found resonance among groups seeking to challenge exclusionary practices or to advocate for those left unseen by mainstream society. For instance, some contemporary activists have drawn on the motif of the silent witness embodied by Joseph, framing their own efforts as acts of retrieval, restoring dignity to those whose stories have been buried or ignored. The legend thus morphs into a rallying cry for restorative action, positioning the act of uncovering forgotten voices as an ethical imperative rather than a mere academic pursuit. Pushing further, the Joseph narrative has been invoked as a metaphor in therapeutic and healing contexts, particularly in settings that prioritize recovery from trauma or loss. Counselors and facilitators sometimes reference the journey of Joseph, who, according to alternative traditions, persevered through adversity and silence, as an allegory for the process of making peace with unresolved pain. This symbolic framework encourages individuals to view their own hidden chapters with compassion, suggesting that what remains unspoken or suppressed is not a source of shame, but a reservoir of potential insight and growth. The therapeutic use of such stories creates space for participants to articulate personal narratives that have long been suppressed, fostering a sense of agency and renewal. In this way, the legend is not static, it becomes a living template for resilience and transformation, mirroring the unpredictable, nonlinear nature of genuine healing. As the legend finds new life in these arenas, it also catalyzes fresh conversations about the ethics of memory and the responsibilities of those who curate collective histories. In museum studies and archival science, the Joseph motif has prompted critical questions about what is preserved, what is excluded, and who gets to decide. Curators and historians grapple with the tension between honoring established narratives and making room for alternative accounts that may disrupt conventional wisdom. The metaphor of a lost or hidden gospel becomes a tool for interrogating institutional blind spots, encouraging those entrusted with the stewardship of memory to seek out voices and artifacts that challenge the status quo. Now, think about your own encounters with museums or archives. Have you ever wondered whose stories are missing from the exhibits, or what truths might be waiting just beyond the official narrative? The Joseph legend, in this context, invites ongoing vigilance and humility in the face of incomplete remembrance. Turning to the field of conflict resolution, the Joseph story has been reframed as an instructive case study in mediating between divided communities or perspectives. Facilitators often draw on the motif of a mediator who acts discreetly and with integrity, using indirect influence to bridge seemingly unbridgeable gaps. This approach emphasizes the power of quiet intervention rather than public confrontation, highlighting the value of patience, empathy, and strategic listening. The legend thus serves as a blueprint for those seeking common ground in polarized environments, suggesting that sometimes the most profound changes emerge not from overt declarations, but from subtle acts of connection that gradually transform entrenched positions. Finally, the Joseph narrative has inspired a wave of experimental storytelling in film and digital media, where creators use nonlinear timelines and fragmented perspectives to evoke the sense of searching for a missing piece. These artistic choices mirror the experience of sifting through layers of myth, rumor, and partial truths, inviting audiences to engage as active participants in the act of reconstruction. The result is a genre that resists tidy resolutions, instead honoring the complexity and ambiguity that define both ancient legend and contemporary life. Now, imagine watching a film that refuses to tie up every narrative thread. Instead, it leaves you pondering what remains off-screen, challenging you to become a co-creator of meaning in partnership with the storyteller. Through these varied applications, the Joseph of Arimathea legend continues to ignite new forms of engagement, pressing us to reconsider what it means to recover, retell, and reimagine the stories that shape our collective consciousness. Delving deeper into the realm of Joseph of Arimathea's elusive post-crucifixion story, one encounters the intriguing interplay between this legend and the evolution of secret societies, particularly those that emerged during the Renaissance and Enlightenment. Many of these organizations, ranging from esoteric brotherhoods to proto-scientific circles, wove the figure of Joseph into their foundational myths, using his narrative as a symbol of concealed wisdom and the pursuit of higher truths. While the public face of these societies often revolved around rituals and codes, internally, they cultivated elaborate allegories centered on Joseph's supposed guardianship of sacred knowledge. The idea that enlightenment required both discretion and a willingness to challenge orthodoxy resonated strongly within these groups, encouraging members to pursue inquiry in a climate where open dissent could be dangerous. In effect, Joseph's legend became a cipher for the values of secrecy, gradual revelation, and intellectual courage, shaping the ethos of societies that prized both individual insight and collective loyalty. Adding another layer, the Joseph tradition has significantly impacted the design and symbolism of early modern architecture, especially in Western Europe. Certain chapels and cathedrals, constructed during periods of religious upheaval, incorporate subtle iconographic references that allude to Joseph's role as a custodian of mysteries. For instance, some stained glass windows depict scenes not found in any biblical text, such as a solitary traveler bearing a vessel through unfamiliar terrain. These architectural flourishes were not mere artistic indulgences, they served as coded invitations for the observant to ponder what lay beneath the surface of official doctrine. By embedding ambiguous symbols in public spaces, builders and patrons encouraged visitors to become interpreters, active participants in the ongoing quest for understanding. This architectural storytelling blurred the lines between sacred space and secret message, fostering a culture of layered meaning that persists in art historical circles to this day. Moving forward, the legend's influence extends into the realm of early print culture and the dissemination of controversial ideas. With the advent of movable type, printers and authors seeking to skirt censorship often cloaked radical or speculative works in allegorical references to Joseph's lost gospel. By framing treatises on science, philosophy, or political reform as ancient recoveries or rediscovered wisdoms, these writers could smuggle subversive arguments past censors under the guise of innocuous antiquarianism. This literary camouflage provided plausible deniability while simultaneously appealing to readers' appetites for the forbidden. The tactic illustrates the broader power of the Joseph legend as a tool for navigating, and subtly undermining, systems of control, demonstrating how the myth's flexibility could be weaponized in the service of intellectual freedom. Switching gears, the psychological dimensions of the Joseph narrative manifest in the way it has been harnessed as a metaphor for the experience of intellectual exile. Throughout history, thinkers marginalized by prevailing institutions have found solace and inspiration in Joseph's ambiguous fate. Whether they were scientists condemned by religious authorities, writers ostracized for their ideas, or reformers forced into hiding, many have drawn on the image of the exiled custodian of secrets as a means of articulating their own sense of isolation and perseverance. This metaphorical kinship forged a lineage of outsiders who, despite being denied access to mainstream platforms, continued to shape the currents of human thought from the margins. In this sense, Joseph's story became a rallying point for those committed to pursuing truth even when recognition or safety was far from guaranteed. Taking all this into account, the legend's reach is further evident in the subtle but persistent echoes found in contemporary digital subcultures. Online forums and collaborative platforms often adopt the motif of hidden or fragmented knowledge, encouraging users to piece together clues in pursuit of a larger truth, echoing the centuries-old fascination with Joseph's lost gospel. This digital iteration transforms the search for meaning into a communal game, blurring the boundaries between play, scholarship, and activism. Now, reflect on how this echoes your own engagement with online communities. The satisfaction of uncovering a well-hidden reference or solving a complex puzzle resonates with the ancient allure of secret wisdom, even when the context is entirely modern. The legend's enduring adaptability thus highlights its power not only to survive but to thrive in the ever-evolving landscape of human curiosity. Peering into the subtle interplay between Joseph of Arimathea's legend and the shifting nature of authority, one uncovers a dynamic arena where power is continually renegotiated through the invocation of hidden wisdom. Rather than acting as static figureheads, those who invoke Joseph's legacy often wield it to challenge prevailing hierarchies or legitimize alternative forms of governance. This is especially evident in times of social upheaval, when established institutions are called into question and the right to interpret sacred or historical truths becomes a contested prize. Groups on the fringes, whether political reformers or emerging spiritual communities, have repeatedly drawn on the motif of Joseph as a silent custodian of transformative knowledge to justify new visions of leadership. In these contexts, the claim to possess or even seek a lost gospel is less about the content itself and more about signaling a break from tradition, a willingness to assert autonomy, and an implicit promise of renewal for those willing to follow. Simultaneously, the shifting tides of authority become even more apparent when you examine the ways Josephine motifs have been used to mediate disputes between competing factions. Instead of open confrontation, leaders sometimes invoke the idea of hidden teachings as a means of brokering compromise or introducing ambiguity that diffuses tension. For example, in local disputes over religious practice or social custom, invoking the possibility of a deeper, unrecorded wisdom attributed to Joseph can create space for dialogue by suggesting that no group holds the ultimate answer. This tactic, akin to introducing a wild card into a game, encourages participants to step back from entrenched positions and consider alternative perspectives. It's a subtle reminder that, sometimes, the mere hint of a missing piece can foster humility and creative problem-solving where rigid dogma would only escalate conflict. In a broader sense, the Joseph legend has also shaped perceptions of expertise and the credentials necessary to interpret complex or ambiguous information. As societies have grown more literate and specialized, the question of who is qualified to speak with authority has become increasingly fraught. The invocation of Joseph's lost gospel, particularly in scholarly or religious debates, has often served as a rhetorical device to question the monopoly of established experts. By implying that essential truths remain hidden or have been deliberately excluded from mainstream accounts, advocates for reform or innovation can undermine the perceived infallibility of existing authorities. This dynamic is vividly illustrated in debates surrounding historical revisionism, where claims of suppressed documents or alternative narratives force traditional gatekeepers to defend their interpretations against a tide of skepticism and insurgent voices. Furthermore, the legend's resonance extends into the realm of technological authority, especially as digital platforms democratize access to information. The proliferation of online forums, independent publishing, and open-source research tools has shifted the balance of power from centralized institutions to decentralized, often self-organizing communities. In this landscape, the Joseph motif is sometimes reimagined as a symbol of crowdsourced wisdom, where the collective search for meaning overrides the directives of any single authority. Now, picture the impact when an online community, galvanized by the prospect of uncovering a hidden text or unraveling a historical enigma, assembles its own archives, fact-checkers, and discussion leaders, creating a new, fluid hierarchy that is both more inclusive and more volatile than anything that existed before. Against this backdrop, the Joseph tradition not only mirrors but actively shapes the ongoing struggle to define who gets to arbitrate truth, distribute knowledge, and set the boundaries of legitimacy. Rather than a single, fixed pattern, authority in this context becomes a living negotiation, one that is perpetually renewed with each invocation of the lost, the hidden, or the yet-to-be-revealed. This continual flux ensures that the legend remains a vital touchstone for anyone navigating the complex interplay between tradition and transformation, expertise and inquiry, certainty and the unknown. Reflecting on this journey so far, it becomes evident that the narrative of Joseph of Arimathea and his lost gospel has functioned less as a solitary tale and more as an intricate tapestry, woven from countless threads of aspiration, uncertainty, and human ingenuity. The legend has not only persisted through centuries but also transformed, adapting itself to the shifting contours of every age it has touched. Like a river that carves its own bed yet is continually shaped by the changing landscape, this story has been both sculptor and subject, responding to the tides of belief, skepticism, and curiosity. Each exploration, whether scientific, artistic, philosophical, or cultural, has contributed a unique current, converging into a broad stream that carries us toward deeper questions about how we construct meaning from the unknown. As we navigate these converging currents, it becomes clear that the power of the Joseph narrative lies not in static answers but in the perpetual motion it inspires. The interplay between what is revealed and what remains concealed acts as a catalyst, stirring imagination and prompting inquiry that extends far beyond the confines of the original legend. This dynamic tension, between the known and the unknowable, the spoken and the unspoken, echoes through all facets of the human experience. It mirrors the way we approach our own blind spots, the spaces where certainty dissolves and possibility takes root. In the same way that a prism refracts light into a spectrum of colors, the legend refracts our collective search for truth into a spectrum of interpretations and aspirations, each illuminating a different facet of the timeless human urge to seek, to question, and to hope. Amidst this interplay, there emerges a sense of continuity that defies simple resolution. The boundaries between fact and fiction, history and myth, become porous, inviting us to inhabit the ambiguous terrain where stories are not simply inherited but actively remade. Here, the act of searching acquires a significance all its own, independent of any ultimate discovery. The journey itself, marked by detours, reversals, and moments of fleeting clarity, serves as both compass and destination. In this space, the legend ceases to be a relic of the past and instead becomes a living dialogue, an ongoing negotiation between memory and imagination, tradition and innovation. Moving forward, the convergence of these threads offers more than just an intellectual exercise, it beckons us to reconsider the very nature of the stories we cherish and the silences we encounter. The Joseph narrative's persistent ambiguity becomes a lens through which to view our own engagement with the unknown, not as a source of frustration, but as an invitation to remain open, adaptable, and attentive to what lies beneath the surface. Just as a shadow can reveal the shape of an object without disclosing all its details, so too can the contours of this legend help us sense the outlines of deeper truths that resist easy articulation. As we pivot towards the final reflection, consider how this cumulative journey has subtly reshaped the landscape of your own curiosity. The interplay of myth, history, and personal longing has not merely been an exploration of a single legend, but rather a meditation on the enduring human condition, the need to search, to question, and to find meaning even in ambiguity. With each step, the boundaries between seeker and story blur, drawing us closer to the heart of why such narratives endure. The ground beneath us is no longer quite the same as when we began. It is richer, more nuanced, and alive with the possibility that, in seeking what is lost, we might discover something even more profound about ourselves and the world we inhabit. The story of Joseph of Arimathea's lost gospel lingers long after the last page is turned, not because it hands us concrete answers, but because it dares us to live with the questions. In its shadows and silences, we find a mirror for our own search, for meaning, for belonging, for a wisdom that is always just out of reach. Yet, what makes the legend truly powerful is not the prospect of some ancient text waiting to be discovered in a forgotten crypt, but the way it illuminates the ongoing dance between certainty and mystery that defines our lives. The allure of the lost, the hidden, the untold is not merely about what history has withheld from us, but about the deep, timeless human drive to seek, to uncover, to wonder. In that sense, Joseph's story is not just about the past, it's about the present moment, and every moment in which we choose curiosity over complacency. There is something profoundly human in the way we respond to stories with missing pieces. Faced with the incomplete, we do not simply turn away, we imagine, we create, we reach across the silence, filling in the gaps with hope, memory, and possibility. The legend of Joseph's secret gospel becomes, in this light, less a puzzle to be solved and more a call to embrace uncertainty as a vital part of the journey. It's a reminder that the unknown is not a void but a horizon, an invitation to grow, to invent, to connect with others who are searching in their own ways. In negotiating the boundaries between myth and fact, between what is spoken and what is withheld, we are practicing the essential art of being alive, listening deeply, questioning bravely, and allowing ourselves to be changed by the encounter with the unfamiliar. Perhaps the most enduring gift of this legend is the sense of humility it inspires, a gentle but persistent reminder that no matter how much we discover, there will always be more to learn, more to imagine, more to question. The lost gospel, whether it ever truly existed or not, stands as a symbol for the inexhaustible richness of the human spirit. It nudges us to consider that wisdom is not a static possession but a living conversation, one that is always evolving, always unfinished, and always richer when shared. The stories we inherit and pass on, with all their uncertainties and contradictions, are not flaws to be corrected but invitations to participate in the ongoing work of meaning-making. So as you step away from the legend of Joseph of Arimathea and his elusive gospel, let it serve as more than a curiosity from a distant past. Let it be a companion on your own journey into the unknown, a gentle provocation to keep asking, seeking, and listening, not just for the answers, but for the echoes of possibility that arise in the spaces between. The true practice begins now, in the willingness to dwell in the questions, to honor what is hidden as much as what is revealed, and to let the search itself become a source of connection, transformation, and wonder. In the end, perhaps the greatest secret is not what was lost, but what we become in the very act of seeking.